Our journey through Lazio begins in Rome, a city with a rich past that offers an immense treasure chest of artistic masterpieces. Our first view is of the majestic Piazza Venezia, situated in the very heart of the city. The piazza is dominated by the Vittoriano, a colossal monument dedicated to King Vittorio Emanuele II to celebrate the unification of Italy. Climb the flight of steps up to the Piazza del Campidoglio, designed by Michelangelo, who managed to create a harmonious and imposing effect in a relatively small space. In the middle of the piazza stands the famous equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius, a copy of the original, which is now in the entrance hall to the Capitoline Museum, one of the two buildings flanking the piazza. Facing it is the Palazzo dei Conservatori, which has the largest collection of ancient sculpture in the world, including the she-wolf, an Etruscan work dating from the 6th century BC, the legendary symbol of Rome and its origins. From the terrace behind the Palazzo Senatorio, we get a magnificent view of the Roman Forum, the immense piazza of ancient Rome, which was the hub of all its activities for 1,000 years, and which has always been considered the cradle of Roman civilization and of the Western world. Massive Flavian Amphitheater, or Colosseum, is the largest building from ancient Rome. It was begun by Vespasian in 72 AD and completed by his son Titus 8 years later. This huge amphitheater could hold about 50,000 spectators. The Colosseum was used mainly for fights between gladiators and wild animals, against a backdrop of elaborate scenery. On one side of the amphitheater stands the imposing Arch of Constantine. The valley between the Palatine and the Aventine hills is the site of the Circus Maximus, the largest stadium for chariot racing in the Roman world. Its tiered seats could hold 250,000 spectators. This was also a place where Christian martyrs died. Their bodies were buried in the catacombs outside the city, along the Via Appia. This road leaves Rome through the Porta Appia, also known as the Porta di San Sebastiano, the largest and best preserved gate in the city walls. Today it is possible to visit some of the catacombs along the Via Appia. The oldest are the catacombs of San Callisto, which are on various levels underground, like all the others, forming an intricate maze. The triumph of Christianity over paganism is represented by San Giovanni in Laterano, the Cathedral of Rome, which the Emperor Constantine had built on property belonging to the Lateran family. This complex of buildings was the official residence of the popes for about 1,000 years, until 1378, when they moved to the Vatican. The majestic interior was laid out by Borromini in 1650 in the Baroque style. Another of Rome's four major basilicas is San Paolo fuori le mura, St. Paul's without the walls, the largest after St. Peter's. A statue of St. Paul stands at the fine entrance, which has 4 doors. The interior is grandiose and solemn. 4 rows of granite columns divide the basilica into 5 naves. The splendid coffered ceiling is decorated with elaborate gilded reliefs. Another basilica is Santa Maria Maggiore. Legend has it that this church stands on the site of a miraculous snowfall in August 356. The church was consecrated by Pope Sixtus III in 431. The interior still has much of its original appearance, with its 12th century flooring, elaborate mosaics, and a 16th century wooden ceiling, which was gilded, so the story goes, with the first gold from the Americas. On one side of the Isola Tiberina, the only island in the river Tiber, we can see the Ponte Fabricio bridge, dating from 62 BC, still almost perfectly preserved. Nearby stands the beautiful church of Santa Maria in Cosmedin. In the portico of the church there is the well-known Bocca della Verità, mouth of truth. According to the legend, this marble effigy of a river god will bite the hand of a liar. In the piazza in front of the church, we can see the well-preserved temple of Fortuna Virile and the circular temple of Vesta, dating from the Augustan age. The vast area known as Campo Marzio was originally open fields. Later it was dedicated to the god Mars and used as a military base and training ground for the Roman legions. Today, one of Rome's most beautiful piazzas is located here, Piazza Navona. In the middle of the piazza stands the monumental Fountain of the Four Rivers, designed by Bernini. Near Piazza Navona is Piazza della Rotonda, which gives us a spectacular view of the best preserved building from Imperial Rome, the Pantheon. This building, whose name means all the gods, was erected by Agrippa, son-in-law of Augustus, who dedicated it to all the pagan gods. However, the present-day appearance dates from the time of the Emperor Hadrian, one of the great figures of Roman history. The vast and solemn interior contains the tomb of the great Italian painter Raphael, as well as those of the last kings of Italy. The building has a vast dome of 43 meters in diameter. Even now, it is the world's largest dome in unreinforced concrete, even bigger than that of St. Peter's. There is another wonderful view of Rome from the top of the Janiculum hill. In the middle of the piazza stands the statue of Giuseppe Garibaldi, the driving force behind Italian unification. One of the city's finest squares is Piazza della Repubblica. In the middle is the beautiful Fountain of the Naiads, a large circular basin flanked by 4 bronze groups of mythological marine creatures. However, the elaborate Trevi Fountain is the peak achievement in the construction of Roman fountains. Designed by Nicola Salvi in the early 18th century, the composition brings together architectural and natural features in a richly spectacular scene. A well-known custom is for visitors to throw coins into the fountain to make sure they come back to the Eternal City again. The Villa Borghese and its estate, which once belonged to the Borghese family, is the best-known public park in Rome. The villa itself houses an important museum and art gallery, the Galleria Borghese, one of the finest private collections in the world. Leaving the museum, we make our way to the Pincio, another beautiful terrace overlooking one of the city's most important squares, Piazza del Popolo. Now we come to the heart of 18th century Rome, the Spanish Steps, leading up to the Church of Trinità dei Monti from the beautiful square, Piazza di Spagna. At the foot of the steps, there is an interesting fountain known as the Barcaccia by Pietro Bernini, father of the more famous Gian Lorenzo Bernini. During the time when the Pantheon was being built, the Emperor Hadrian also started work on his new residence known as Hadrian's Villa near Tivoli. However, it was on the banks of the river Tiber that he erected the most impressive building that has survived, Hadrian's Mausoleum. The building was later turned into a fortress, and during the Middle Ages it was given the name of Castel Sant'Angelo. From the highest point of Castel Sant'Angelo, we get one of the best views of the city. The whole scene is dominated by the bulk of St. Peter's and its celebrated dome, which Romans simply call Il Cupolone, the Big Dome. St. Peter's Square is an immense oval constructed in the mid-17th century by Gian Lorenzo Bernini in just 11 years. It has 284 columns set out in 4 rows. The first basilica was built by Constantine over St. Peter's tomb and inaugurated in 349 AD. The construction of the present basilica began in 1506 under Pope Julius II, and it took over a century to complete it. The interior is so vast and elaborate that it is difficult to comprehend it at first. The whole church is 119 meters long and can hold about 60,000 people. The church contains an austere bronze statue of St. Peter, attributed to the 13th century Florentine sculptor Arnolfo di Cambio. The first chapel on the right contains the most important sculpture in the church, the Pietà by Michelangelo, who produced this sublime masterpiece when he was only 24. From the top of the dome, there is a fine view of the city and the Vatican gardens. The Vatican is the smallest state in the world, and its Renaissance buildings contain an immense treasure of artworks. The Vatican museums, for example, contain some of the most important artistic collections in the world. The Raphael rooms form part of the papal apartment that Pope Julius II had frescoed by the great artist from Urbino. The most famous and spectacular part is certainly the Sistine Chapel, which takes its name from Pope Sixtus IV, and is the place where the cardinals gather in conclave to elect the new pope. The side walls were decorated by well-known 15th century artists, including Sandro Botticelli. But the most impressive part is the decoration of the ceiling vault, frescoed by Michelangelo between 1508 and 1512. On the wall behind the altar, there is the Last Judgment, which Michelangelo carried out 22 years after the ceiling vault. Fountains were an important part of Renaissance architecture, and the more the merrier. To see the most spectacular example, we have to go to Tivoli, an old town just a few miles from Rome. Ippolito d'Este, Cardinal of Ferrara, had just been elected governor of the city of Tivoli. He decided to transform the old Benedictine monastery, the governor's headquarters, into a stupendous villa in imitation of an ancient Roman residence, especially the legendary villa of the Emperor Hadrian. The Cardinal commissioned one of the most famous architects of the day, Piero Ligorio, to design a wonderful park, both aesthetically and technically. The terrace gardens overlook the Roman countryside, and there are centuries-old trees and enormous statues, fountains, and decorative features that create a dazzling spectacle. The most famous attraction is the Path of 100 Fountains, running the length of the garden, whose jets of water create an extraordinary sight. The marvels of this beautiful town do not end with Villa d'Este. Nearby, there is one of the most spectacular architectural complexes of the ancient Roman period we know of, Hadrian's Villa. It was built in the 2nd century AD by the Emperor Hadrian, who filled it with examples of his refined late Hellenistic culture. There are theatres and libraries and recollections of places he visited during his many journeys throughout the eastern provinces of the empire. It took 20 years to complete, but eventually it became the largest and most splendid Roman villa ever built. Another famous spot in the villa is the Canopo, a splendid pool surrounded by the columns of a beautiful portico decorated with numerous statues. The Maritime Theatre is a charming, unusual place with a channel surrounding a small island, on which there is a small building. It is completely isolated and is thought to be the Emperor's private studio. This magical, extraordinary place, with its great historical and cultural significance, honours a small but important town. It represents an important step on our journey into Italy's past. According to legend, the large Etruscan city, Tarxuna or Tarxa, was founded by Tarconte, the brother or son of Tirino. Through the centuries, the town became one of the main centres of a legendary people, the Etruscans, whose mysterious world is revealed by the famous frescoes found in the tombs of their necropolises. It was the extraordinary cult these people had for the dead that urged them to construct thousands of tombs, all frescoed with a dazzling kaleidoscope of coloured images. More than 5,700 of these images date from the 5th century BC to the end of the Roman era. It is an unforgettable sight, and despite the thousands of years that have gone by, visitors and scholars are still amazed. They marvel at the technical perfection that has challenged time, the cold, humidity, and in many cases the voracity of tomb robbers who for many years plundered this marvellous place of art, culture and history. Today, many of the numerous remains found here are in the museum located in the Palazzo Vitelleschi. It is an amazing collection of vases, funeral plaques, sarcophagi, furniture and jewellery that provides a good idea of what life must have been amongst this ancient Italic people. Travel north to one of the most fascinating towns in the region, Viterbo. Its history is impressed in its name, which comes from Vetus Urbis, Old City. Still today, an imposing wall about 3 miles long surrounds the heart of the town. Historical events made it the scene of struggle between powerful contesting groups for centuries. The heart of the town is Piazza Del Plebiscito, with 3 sides made up of buildings that house the town's administrative offices. There's the Palazzo del Podestà from 1264, the Palazzo della Prefettura, and the Palazzo dei Priori, now the town hall, which was built at the end of the 15th century during the reign of Pope Sixtus IV. The San Pellegrino district is the oldest part of the town. Very well preserved, it represents one of the most intact and splendid examples of a medieval district. Finally, there is the most famous spot, Piazza San Lorenzo. This elegant urban space is dominated by the solemn structure of the cathedral, which tradition says was built in the 12th century on the site of an ancient temple of Hercules, the legendary founder of Viterbo. The interior has 3 naves and preserves numerous works of great artistic value. On the other side of the piazza is the famous Palazzo Papade. It is a testimony to the many dramatic events linked to the history of the papacy. The palazzo was built by the Capitano del Popolo, Rainero Gatti, as a dwelling for the popes who did not hesitate to take refuge there from the turbulent events that afflicted the Roman Curia. One of the stairways rises to a Gothic colonnade leading to a roofless room, the result of a celebrated historical event. In 1271, the same Rainero Gatti, on the advice of Saint Bonaventure, seeing the impossibility of being elected due to the quarrels of the cardinals, at first locked them in. This gave rise to the word conclave, that is cum clave, or with key. Finally, he had the roof of the room demolished. In the end, he only succeeded in obtaining the whispered name of the man elected after 33 months of detention, including depriving them of food. Still in the province of Viterbo, we visit one of the most charming towns in the region, Civita di Bagnoregio. Sitting atop a spur of tuffo, the town appears like a vision from another era. It also boasts a famous son. In 1221, Giovanni da Fidanza was born here. He became universally celebrated as Saint Bonaventura, one of the greatest of Christian philosophers and theologians. Today you enter the town over a long, risky bridge that testifies to the sad state of the town. For some time it has been crumbling under its own weight and sinking into the fragile tuffo rock beneath it. It is called the Dying Town, and a visit can be very poignant. It lies like a Christmas crib frozen in time, where you can admire doorways in basalt, Roman funerary stones, granite columns of an ancient pagan temple, and medieval houses from the 15th century. It is an emotional visit of great poetry and beauty. This is another solitary village set on a spur of rock rising majestically over the valley of the Treia. Calcata Vecchia is located in an area that many will find difficult in recognizing, but which they have certainly seen in many well-known films. The valley of Treia, which is now a splendid nature park, provided the set for many westerns shot here because of the wild natural environment. Today the town seems deserted, but visitors discover a microcosm of artists and artisans who have made it their home, enhancing the ancient houses, the narrow streets and the charming piazzas with delightful works of art. Moving south, we come to one of the most interesting areas of the region, the Ciociaria. This is Palestrina, a delightful town that was the birthplace of a famous composer of the 16th century, Giovanni Pierluigi, known as Palestrina. The most celebrated monument in the town is the immense temple of Fortuna Primigenia, one of the most important sanctuaries of antiquity. The temple dates back to the 2nd century BC and is exceptional both technically and artistically. It is considered one of the most grandiose examples of Hellenistic architecture in Italy. Inside is the wonderful National Archaeological Museum of Palestrina, with pieces of exceptional value found among the ruins of the sanctuary and in the surrounding area. Other works include the great mosaic from the Nile, a splendid visual picture dating back to 80 BC showing the flooding of the great river. This work of exceptional artistic value gives us a lifelike depiction of Egypt in the past. Another famous piece in the museum is the Triade Capitolina, a beautiful piece in marble that is the only example in the world of an ancient sculpture depicting the three divinities of Rome, Jupiter, Juno and Minerva. Remaining in Ciociaria, a marvellous part of Lazio, we visit Alatri, a splendid ancient town built around an acropolis and defended by several of the most imposing megalithic walls still standing. Dating from the 4th century BC, the walls are made with huge blocks of stone. The heart of the town is Piazza Santa Maria Maggiore, with the Fontana Pia in the centre. It was built in 1870 as a sign of gratitude for the generosity of Pope Pius IX to the town. Before us is the beautiful church of Santa Maria in Gothic Romanesque style, originally built in the 5th century. Inside are very interesting statues and frescoes dating from the 12th century and later. Continuing our journey along the Via Flacca that leads south, we come to one of the most famous seaside towns in Lazio, Sperlonga. This small seafaring village is today one of the most noted bathing places along the coast of Lazio, but has not lost its ancient fascination. Its white houses and narrow streets descending to the sea resemble a painting full of colours and landscapes and numerous charming details. This place has a long history, beginning with its celebrated grottos. Some extraordinary Roman remains were found in one of them, and this led to the reconstruction of a villa cut into the cliff. It is called the Grotto of Tiberius, after the emperor who lived there. Today, the wonderful remains found in the ancient Nymphaeum are on view in a splendid modern museum located nearby. They provide a fascinating journey through the world of art and the ancient Roman concept of beauty. end our journey through this extraordinary region by sailing to the marvellous islands that make up the small archipelago of Capo Circeo. Ponza is one of the most fascinating islands in Italian waters. Renowned for its clear sea and fishing, life on the island is still centred around its old port, built by the Bourbons at the end of the 18th century. Ponza needs to be seen from the sea by skirting the 20 kilometres of coast in the small boats that can be rented all over the island. Everyone can choose their own private beach, such as the legendary Chiaia di Luna, a long strip of sand beside an immense white rock face. It is linked to the port by a long gallery excavated by the ancient Romans. With its beaches and turquoise blue sea, Ponza is one of the most beautiful islands in the Mediterranean. Not far from Ponza is small Zanoni, once a private island but today part of the small but important Circeo National Park. Covered with Mediterranean scrub and a large wood of oak trees, it is the seasonal stopping place for about 160 varieties of birds. They provide a wonderful occasion for studying these species. top of the hill, which can be reached by a path that offers breathtaking views, are the remains of the Benedictine monastery of Santo Spirito, abandoned by the monks in the 13th century when they moved to Gaeta. Finally, there is Ventotene, the last jewel in this magical region. The island is little more than 1 square kilometre, but has a history that few other islands can boast of. Here, at the beginning of the Imperial Roman era, a very sumptuous villa was built for Julia, the daughter of the Emperor Augustus, who was exiled by her father because of her immoral life. The occasion allowed this small patch of sea to acquire splendid Roman testimonies, beginning with the marvellous port, the only one remaining from antiquity that is still functioning today. The most important remains are preserved in a charming little museum. They recall the imposing history of this wonderful Italian region, a land where, without exaggeration, a large part of Western civilization was born.